betrayed by my own parents. How I survived their abuse, fought back against their greed, and built the life they tried to destroy. My parents are selfish. They mistreated me in childhood and turned a blind eye to everything. And when I earned a large sum of money, they came to sue me for it. My name is Matthew, and my life began in a way that few could endure. I was born into a family that should never have existed. From my earliest days, confusion and darkness were constants, overshadowing every memory I have of childhood. I never fit in, not at home, not anywhere. My parents, Linda and Paul, were the last people who should have been raising a child. Linda was cold and distant, treating me more as a burden than a son. Paul wasn't much better, he was rarely around, and when he was either buried in work or lost in a bottle. And when his anger boiled over, it was always directed at me. Linda never hid the fact that she had no desire for children. She had plans for her life plans that didn't include the chaos of raising a child. I was an unplanned mistake, something she couldn't undo, and she made sure I knew it. It wasn't just neglect that shaped me, it was outright hostility. My parents didn't merely ignore me, they actively resented me. To them, I was nothing more than an anchor, weighing them down. My earliest memories are filled with the sounds of their arguments, objects being thrown, and the nights I spent hiding under my bed, trying to escape the storms that raged just beyond my door. There's one night I can't forget, no matter how hard I try. I was around 6 years old, and I had done something trivial, but it was enough to set them off. I don't remember what it was, but I remember the aftermath. The sound of glass shattering, the cold liquid running down my face, and the sharp pain that followed. Paul had thrown a bottle at me, and the broken glass cut deep into my skin. I screamed, more from shock than pain. But instead of comforting me, Linda just looked at me with disgust. "Stop your whining," she snapped. "You're pathetic." That was the night I learned not to cry, not to show weakness. It was the night I began building the walls that would protect me from them and from the world. School wasn't any better. If home was a war zone, school was a minefield. I was the weird kid, the one who didn't talk much, the one who wore the same clothes day after day because my parents didn't care enough to buy me new ones. The teachers viewed me with a mix of pity and irritation, as though I was a problem they couldn't figure out how to solve. I was always alone, the kid sitting in the corner during recess, pretending to read while the other kids played. But they didn't leave me in peace. They made it their mission to remind me every day that I didn't belong. One boy, Ryan, made it his personal goal to make my life miserable. He was bigger, stronger, and knew how to use that strength to his advantage. It started with name-calling and shoving, but it quickly escalated. He would corner me after school, taunting me, daring me to fight back, but I never did. I just took it because what else could I do? I remember the day Ryan decided to take it to the next level. It was a Wednesday, I think. We were in the bathroom, and he and his friends had me trapped again. But this time, he pulled out a lighter. "Want to see something cool?" He grinned. I didn't answer. I just stood there, frozen, as he flicked the lighter on and off. The flame danced, and I felt a chill run down my spine. "You scared, Matt?" He sneered. "You gonna cry?" I didn't cry. I didn't make a sound, but inside I was screaming. He lunged at me, grabbing my arm and holding it to my skin. I felt the heat, the pain, but I didn't fight back. I just stood there, waiting for it to end. When he finally let go, I ran. I didn't stop until I was home, my arm raw and blistered. But when I walked through the door, no one was there to help me. No one cared. My parents didn't even notice. Ryan wasn't the only one. The teachers, the other kids, they all played their part in making my life a nightmare. I was the scapegoat, the one everyone could pick on. One teacher, Mrs. Parker, seemed to take a special pleasure in humiliating me. She would call on me in class, knowing I didn't know the answer, and then mock me in front of everyone when I got it wrong. "You're never going to amount to anything, Matthew," she'd say, her voice dripping with contempt. "Why do you even bother?" I didn't have an answer. I didn't have an answer for anyone. I was just trying to survive. But it wasn't just the physical and emotional abuse that left scars. It was the secrets of things that happened when no one else was around. Things I couldn't tell anyone about, even if I wanted to. There was a man, a friend of my parents, I guess. He would come over sometimes, usually when Paul was too drunk to care. He would take me to the basement, away from prying eyes, and do things no child should ever endure. I tried to tell Linda once. I told her what he did, what he made me do. But she didn't believe me. She slapped me and told me to stop lying. That was the last time I ever tried to tell anyone. I learned to keep quiet, to keep my head down, to disappear. I became invisible, a ghost in my own life. I stopped feeling, stopped caring, because it was the only way to survive. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't escape the darkness that followed me everywhere. It was always there, lurking, waiting to pull me under. When I was about 12, something inside me finally broke. I came home from school one day, bloodied and bruised from another run-in with Ryan. Linda was sitting in the living room, smoking a cigarette, her eyes glued to the TV. I walked past her hoping she wouldn't notice. But she did. "What happened to you?" she demanded, her voice cold. "Nothing," I muttered, keeping my head down. "Don't lie to me," she snapped. "Who did this?" I didn't answer. I just stared at the floor, my fists clenched. "I asked you a question," she shouted, grabbing my arm and yanking me around. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was the years of abuse, the constant pain, the sight of her standing there, so cold and unfeeling. But in that moment I lost control. I shoved her hard. She stumbled back, shock flashing across her face. For a moment I thought I had won. But then her expression changed, and I knew I had made a terrible mistake. She came at me, fists flying, screaming at me, telling me how worthless I was, how she wished I'd never been born. I didn't fight back. I just let her hit me, let her get it out. Because at that moment I didn't care anymore. When she finally stopped, exhausted, she just stood there, breathing heavily, her eyes filled with anger, and something that looked a lot like fear. "Get out of my sight," she hissed. "I never want to see you again." I didn't argue. I just walked out into the cold night, not knowing where I was going, only that I couldn't stay there. I wandered the streets for hours, my mind numb, my body aching. I ended up at the park, the only place where I had ever felt safe. It was late, and the park was empty, the playground cast in eerie shadows by the moonlight. I sat on the swings, staring up at the sky, wondering how my life had come to this. How had I ended up so broken, so lost? Was there any way out, or was I doomed to live in this darkness forever? I don't know how long I sat there, lost in my thoughts, but eventually I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, expecting a stranger, but instead it was Ryan. He was alone, his face twisted into a cruel smile. I didn't move. I just sat there, waiting. "You look like crap, Matt," he sneered. "What's the matter? Your parents finally gave up on you?" I didn't answer. I just stared at him, my eyes blank. He must have seen something in my expression because he didn't hit me. He just stood there, staring at me, his smile fading. "You're pathetic," he muttered, shaking his head. "Not even worth the effort." And then he walked away, leaving me alone in the dark. I don't know how long I sat there after he left, but eventually, I stood up and started walking again, aimlessly, with no destination in mind. I ended up near the train tracks at the edge of town. I stood there, staring at the tracks, wondering if it would be easier to end it all, to step onto the tracks and let the train take me away from all the pain. But I didn't do it. Something inside me, some small spark of life, kept me from taking that final step. I turned away and started walking again, back toward home. When I got there, the house was dark and silent. My parents were either asleep or didn't care enough to wait up. I crept inside, careful not to make a sound, and went to my room. I lay down on my bed, staring up at the ceiling, my mind racing. I didn't cry, I didn't feel anything, I was just empty. That night I realized I was truly alone. There was no one in the world who cared about me, no one who would miss me if I were gone. But I didn't die that night. I kept going. Kept surviving, because that's all I knew how to do. I became a master at hiding, at blending in, at making myself invisible. I learned to navigate the minefield that was my life, avoiding the explosions, taking the hits when I couldn't avoid them. I became numb to the pain, the fear, the loneliness. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't escape the darkness that had taken root inside me. It was always there, lurking, waiting to consume me. And sometimes late at night, when the world was quiet and I was alone with my thoughts, I would wonder if maybe, just maybe, it would be easier to let it. Everything changed one cold, fateful day when I was found by a man named David Thompson. My life was at its lowest point, and I had nothing to live for. But David changed everything in ways I couldn't have imagined. David was patient and kind, qualities that were completely foreign to me. He didn't push or pry, but offered a warmth and understanding that I had never experienced. When he invited me to his home, I resisted at first, out of fear and habit. But hunger and exhaustion eventually won, and I accepted his offer. David's house was small and unassuming at the edge of town. It was nothing like the place I had grown up in. There were no raised voices, no threats around every corner. Instead, it smelled of wood and freshly brewed coffee. It was a home, something I had never known. That night, I slept in a soft, warm bed, in a room that was mine. I had never had a room to myself before. I had never known what it felt like to be safe, to not have to worry about someone barging in, about the next beating or the next cruel word. It was like stepping into a different world. In the days that followed, David began gently coaxing me out of the shell I had built around myself. He introduced me to books, filling my mind with stories of adventure and hope, giving me an escape from the darkness that had plagued me for so long. He taught me about trust, about what it meant to care for someone without expecting anything in return. And slowly I began to heal. David also saw something in me, that no one else had potential. He encouraged me to return to school, to finish my education, and to dream of a future beyond the life I had known. I was hesitant, scared even, but with his support I took plunge. Returning to school was a challenge. I was years behind my peers, and the thought of facing classrooms full of teenagers who were far ahead of me was terrifying. But David was there every step of the way. He worked with me on my homework, helped me catch up, and when I felt like giving up, he reminded me how far I had come. In time, school became more than just a place to learn. It became a place where I started to find myself. In my senior year, I met 5 people who would become my closest friends: Rachel, Alex, Michael, Jenny, and Lisa. They were the first people my age who saw me as a friend, not an outcast. Rachel was bright, full of energy, and had a smile that could light up a room. Alex was quieter, but his loyalty and thoughtfulness made him someone I could always rely on. Michael was the joker of the group, always finding ways to make us laugh, even in the darkest times. Jenny was the artist, her creativity and passion bringing color into our lives. And Lisa was the one who brought us all together, her warmth and empathy creating a bond between us that felt more like family than friendship. We bonded over late-night study sessions, shared our dreams and fears, and talked about the future like it was something within our grasp. For the first time, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could have a future worth living. David officially adopted me when I turned 16. I still remember the day we went to the courthouse, just the 2 of us. The judge asked if I understood what it meant, and I nodded, my heart pounding. When the adoption was finalized, I was overcome with emotion. For the first time in my life, I had a father, someone who chose me, someone who wanted me. It was a simple ceremony, but it meant everything to me. After graduation, my friends and I made a pact we would go to university together. We spent months preparing, filling out applications, visiting campuses, and planning our future. When we all got accepted into the same university, it felt like a dream come true. University was a fresh start, a place where no one knew about my past. I threw myself into my studies, determined to succeed. But university was also a place full of challenges I hadn't anticipated. At first, everything seemed perfect. We were living in dorms close to each other, taking classes together, joining clubs and making new friends. It felt like we were on top of the world. But as the semesters passed, the pressures of university life started to build. There were late nights studying for exams, an overwhelming workload, and constant pressure to succeed. And while most people were supportive, some saw me as an easy target. It started with a few snide comments, jokes about where I came from, about how I didn't belong. I tried to ignore them, focusing on my studies and my friends. But the comments kept coming, growing nastier with each passing week. A group of privileged students seemed to take pleasure in making my life difficult. They were led by a guy named Ethan, someone who exuded arrogance and entitlement. Ethan made it his mission to remind me every day that I wasn't one of them, that I was an outsider. The harassment escalated quickly. My textbooks disappeared, my assignments were mysteriously deleted from my computer, and my dorm room was vandalized more than once. The final straw came one night when I returned to my room to find it trashed, my belongings scattered, and ink poured all over my notes. I felt the old anger, the helplessness rising inside me, but this time I couldn't push it down. I was done being their victim. I was done letting them win. The next day, I confronted Ethan and his friends in the courtyard. I don't remember everything I said, but I remember the feeling like a dam breaking, all the years of pain and rage flooding out. I tore into them with words I didn't know I had in me, exposing their insecurities, their weaknesses, until they were the ones crumbling. By the time I finished, they were on their knees crying and begging for forgiveness. I didn't feel triumph, just an overwhelming sense of release, like a weight had finally been lifted. Word spread quickly about what had happened, and no one bothered me after that. But the experience left me shaken, a reminder that the darkness inside me was still there. I realized then that I couldn't just bury the pain, I had to confront it if I was ever going to move forward. David was a rock during this time. When I told him what had happened, he didn't judge or lecture me. He simply listened, offering his unwavering support. He understood better than anyone what it meant to carry the burden of a painful past, and he helped me find a way to channel my anger into something positive. On David's suggestion, I started seeing a therapist, someone who helped me unpack the trauma I had buried. It wasn't easy, and there were days when I wanted to quit, but slowly I began to heal. I learned how to manage my emotions, how to forgive myself, and how to let go of the anger that had defined me for so long. University wasn't all darkness. There were moments of joy, of laughter, of pure happiness that I had never known before. My friends and I became inseparable, our bond growing stronger with each passing year. We celebrated each other's successes, supported each other through failures, and dreamed of the future we would build together. In our final year, we all started thinking seriously about what came next. Rachel had always wanted to be a journalist, and she landed an internship at a prestigious newspaper. Alex was passionate about technology and started developing an app that quickly gained attention. Michael, with his sharp wit and charm, was drawn to the world of advertising and quickly made a name for himself in the industry. Jenny, the artist, found her calling in graphic design, her work becoming increasingly sought after. And Lisa, with her empathy and ability to connect with people, pursued a career in social work, determined to make a difference in the world. With graduation looming, we began to make plans for the future. We found a small apartment in the city, deciding to live together while we figured out our next steps. It wasn't much, but it was ours, and it felt like the start of something new and exciting. Graduation day was surreal. As I walked across the stage to receive my diploma, I felt a sense of pride I had never known before. I had made it. I had survived everything life had thrown at me, and I had come out the other side stronger, more resilient, and ready to take on the world. After graduation, things moved quickly. Rachel's internship turned into a full-time job, and she quickly made a name for herself in journalism. Alex's app took off, attracting significant investment, and he started his own tech company. Michael's creativity and humor made him a rising star in advertising. Jenny's graphic design business flourished, her art becoming a staple in the industry. And Lisa, with her compassion and dedication, became a beacon of hope for those she helped in her social work. But life after university wasn't without its challenges. The corporate world was cutthroat, and I found myself facing new forms of pressure. There were times when I felt like I was drowning, but I had my friends, and I had David, and they helped me keep my head above water. One of the most shocking moments came about a year after graduation. We were all settling into our careers, each of us facing the pressures and challenges of the real world. One night, Rachel called me, her voice trembling. "Matthew, can you come over?" "Something's wrong," she said. I didn't ask questions. I just grabbed my coat and rushed to her apartment. When I arrived, I found Rachel sitting on the floor, tears streaming down her face. She was holding a letter, her hands trembling. "What's going on?" I asked, rushing to her side. Rachel handed me the letter, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're shutting down my section. I'm being let go." The letter was from the newspaper informing her that they were closing her department effective immediately. Rachel had poured her heart into her work, and now it was being taken away from her in an instant. "It's all falling apart," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Everything I've worked for," I didn't know what to say. Rachel had put everything into her career, and now it was crumbling around her. I pulled her into a hug, holding her as she cried, while Lisa arrived to comfort her. The rest of our friends soon joined, and we spent the night together, supporting Rachel through her shock and uncertainty. Rachel fell into a deep depression, struggling to find meaning after losing the job that had defined her. But we didn't let her fall. We were there for her, just as she had always been there for us. It was a long road, but Rachel eventually found her footing again. She started freelancing, writing for smaller publications, and slowly rebuilding her career. It wasn't easy, and there were many setbacks, but she persevered. And through it all, our friendship remained strong, a constant in a world that was always changing. As for me, I continued to climb the corporate ladder, earning promotions and accolades. But no matter how much success I achieved, I never forgot where I came from, or the people who helped me get there. Another shocking event came a few months later when Alex's company, the one he had poured his heart into, faced a hostile takeover. It was unexpected, ruthless, and it left him reeling. "They're going to take everything," he said one night, despair in his voice. "Everything I've worked for, it's all going to be gone." I had never seen Alex so defeated, so lost. He had always been the calm, steady one, the rock we could all lean on. But now he was the one who needed support. We rallied around Alex, just as we had with Rachel when she lost her job. We spent countless hours strategizing, looking for ways to fend off the takeover, but it felt like a losing battle. In the end, the takeover happened, and Alex lost control of his company. It was devastating, and for a while it seemed like he might never recover. But Alex was stronger than he realized. With our support, he picked himself up, dusted himself off, and started over. He used the money from the buyout to start a new venture, one that was smaller but more aligned with his values. And in time, he found success again. But the most unexpected and heartbreaking event happened to Jenny. One evening, as we all gathered for dinner, Jenny received a call that her parents had been in a car accident. The news was devastating. Both of them had passed away. Jenny was crushed. Her parents had been her biggest supporters, her inspiration. Losing them left her feeling lost and broken. She retreated into herself, her once vibrant spirit dimmed by grief. We all rallied around her, trying to be there for her, but the pain was too deep. It took months for Jenny to find her way out of the darkness. She sought therapy, leaned heavily on us, and slowly began to heal. Her art, which had always been her refuge, became her therapy, helping her process the grief. Over time, she found a way to channel her pain into her work, creating pieces that resonated with others who had experienced loss. In the midst of all these challenges, Lisa and I grew closer. We had always had a special connection, but as we supported our friends through their struggles, our bond deepened. Lisa's kindness, her empathy, her ability to make everyone feel seen and heard, it drew me to her in ways I hadn't expected. We started spending more time together, just the two of us. What began as long walks and late-night conversations gradually blossomed into something more. I found myself falling in love with her, not just for the person she was, but for the way she made me feel like I was worth something, like I had finally found a place where I belong. One night, as we sat on a hill overlooking the city, I told her how I felt. My heart pounded in my chest as I waited for her response. "I've been waiting for you to say that," she whispered, a smile lighting up her face. "I love you too, Matthew. I always have." Our relationship grew from there, deepening with each passing day. We were already best friends, but now we were partners, building a life together. Our friends were thrilled for us, supporting our relationship every step of the way. As the years passed, life continued to throw challenges our way, but through it all, we remained a team of family, in every sense of the word. We celebrated each other's successes, supported each other through failures, and faced every obstacle together. Eventually, I proposed to Lisa. It was a simple, heartfelt moment, in the place where we had shared so many of our late-night conversations. She said yes, and we began planning our future together, surrounded by the friends who had become our family. The wedding was a beautiful, intimate affair, held in a small garden that David had lovingly prepared. Rachel was my best person, with Alex, Michael, and Jenny standing by my side. The ceremony was filled with love and joy, a celebration not just of our union, but of the journey we had all taken together. As I stood there holding Lisa's hands, looking into the eyes of the woman I loved, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I'd come. From the scared, broken kid I once was, I had built a life I never thought possible. I had found love, friendship, and a sense of purpose. Success has a way of attracting attention, not always the good kind. After years of building my life from the ground up, of turning my pain into power and my struggles into success, I had managed to carve out a space for myself in the world. I had a thriving career, good friends, and a future I was proud of. But just when I thought I had finally left the shadows of my past behind, they came back to haunt me in the most unexpected way. It started with a phone call I never expected to receive. I was in my office going over some reports when my assistant buzzed in. "Matthew, there's someone on the line claiming to be your parents," she said, her voice laced with confusion. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. I hadn't seen or heard from Linda and Paul in years, not since the day I walked out of their house and into David's care. They had made it clear that I was nothing to them, and I had spent my life trying to forget they ever existed. "Put them through," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil churning inside me. There was a click, and then I heard a voice I hadn't heard in over a decade. "Matthew," my mother's voice crackled through the line. "It's been a long time." I didn't respond immediately. I wasn't sure what to say, or even if I wanted to say anything at all. "We need to talk," she continued, her tone sharp, as if she were giving me an order. "What do you want?" I asked, keeping my voice as neutral as possible. "It's about the company," she said, and I could hear the greed dripping from her words. "We've heard you've done well for yourself, and well were your parents. We're entitled to a share of what you've built." I clenched my fist under the desk, anger boiling beneath the surface. Entitled? After everything they had done, after all the pain and suffering they had caused, they had the audacity to demand something from me. "You have no right to anything I've built," I said coldly. "You are not my parents. You stopped being my parents the day you threw me away." There was a pause, and then my father's voice came on the line, slurred and unsteady. He was drunk, no surprise there. "Listen here, boy," he growled. "We raised you, we put a roof over your head, fed you, clothed you, you owe us." I felt the rage rising, memories of every beating, every cruel word flashing through my mind. "You didn't raise me," I snapped. "You abused me, you neglected me, you're nothing to me." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line, and then my mother's voice came back, this time laced with venom. "We'll see about that," she hissed. "We'll see what the courts have to say about this. You can't just walk away from your family, Matthew. You owe us, and we're going to get what we deserve." The line went dead, and I sat there seething with anger and disbelief. I had always known that my parents were toxic, but this was a new level of low, even for them. For a few days I tried to push the conversation out of my mind, focusing on work and the life I had built. But then, a week later, a letter arrived, official, cold, and threatening. My parents were suing me for a share of my assets, claiming that as my biological parents, they were entitled to a portion of my wealth. I knew then that this wasn't going to go away. They weren't just after money. They wanted to tear down everything I had built, to drag me back into the darkness I had fought so hard to escape. But I wasn't that scared, broken kid anymore. I wasn't going to let them win. The first step was to hire a lawyer, a good one. I had made enough connections over the years to know exactly who to call. I reached out to Victoria Mason, a sharp non-nonsense attorney with a reputation for being ruthless in the courtroom. I had met her a few years back at a charity event, and I knew she was the one I needed in my corner. Victoria was tall and commanding, with a presence that demanded attention. She listened intently as I explained the situation, her expression growing more serious with every word. "They don't have a leg to stand on, Matthew," she said after I finished. "But that doesn't mean they won't try to drag this out and make your life hell in the process." "Are you prepared for that?" I nodded. "I've been through worse, Victoria. I just want to make sure they don't get a single cent from me." She gave me a tight smile. "Then let's make sure they don't." The lawsuit proceeded quickly. My parents, clearly desperate for money, had hired a cheap lawyer named Greg Lawson. Greg was a shifty character, with a reputation for taking on cases no one else would touch and losing them. He wasn't much of a threat, but I knew better than to underestimate anyone in a legal battle. Victoria and I went over every detail of the case, preparing for the worst. She helped me gather evidence from my childhood medical records, old police reports, and even testimony from neighbors who had witnessed the abuse. It wasn't easy dredging up all those memories, but I knew it was necessary if I wanted to win. We also made a strategic move. Victoria reached out to Greg Lawson with an offer of bribe, really, though we didn't call it that. The idea was simple: we'd offer him a payout if he agreed to intentionally bungle the case. Given his reputation and the fact that he was being paid peanuts by my parents, it didn't take much to convince him. "Are you sure this is the best approach?" I asked Victoria, feeling a bit uneasy about the plan. She looked at me with a level gaze. "It's not about fairness, Matthew, it's about winning, and if this makes the difference between you losing everything or keeping what's rightfully yours, then it's worth it." With Greg on our side, the trial became more of a formality than a real fight. But that didn't mean it was easy. Walking into that courtroom and seeing my parents sitting there, smug and self-assured, was like stepping back into a nightmare. They had aged, their faces lined with bitterness, but their eyes still held that same malice I remembered from my childhood. The trial was presided over by Judge Margaret Evans, a woman known for her fairness and non-nonsense attitude. She was in her early 60s, with silver hair pulled back into a neat bun and sharp, piercing eyes that missed nothing. I could tell from the moment she entered the courtroom that she wasn't going to put up with any nonsense. The trial began with Greg presenting my parents' case. It was pathetic, really. He stumbled over his words, failed to provide any substantial evidence, and even managed to contradict himself more than once. It was clear that he was in over his head, and Judge Evans' patience was wearing thin. When it was Victoria's turn, she took control of the courtroom, with the same commanding presence she had in her office. She laid out the facts with precision, presenting the evidence of my parents' abuse and neglect with chilling clarity. She didn't hold back, describing in detail the injuries I had suffered at my father's hands, the nights I had spent alone and afraid, and the years of emotional torment they had put me through. As she spoke, I could see my parents' smug expressions begin to falter. They hadn't expected this. They had thought they could intimidate me, manipulate me, just like they had when I was a child. But now they were facing the truth, laid bare for everyone to see. Victoria called me to the stand, and as I walked up, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. This was my moment, my chance to finally tell my story, to stand up to the people who had tried to destroy me. I took a deep breath as I faced the courtroom, my eyes locking with my parents. "I'm not here to seek revenge," I began, my voice steady. "I'm here to tell the truth." I recounted the horrors of my childhood, the beatings, the neglect, the constant fear. I spoke about the day I left, the day I found David, and how he had saved me from a life of despair. I described how I had worked tirelessly to build something of my own, to create a life worth living. And then I told them why I would never give my parents a single cent of what I had earned. "They didn't raise me," I said, my voice growing stronger with every word. "They tried to break me. They didn't care if I lived or died. And now, after all these years, they think they can come back into my life and take what I've built. But they're wrong. They're not my parents, they're just people who happened to give birth to me, and they have no right to anything I've accomplished." When I finished, the courtroom was silent. Judge Evans looked at me with something that almost resembled respect, and I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had said what needed to be said, and I had no regrets. Victoria wrapped up our case with a closing argument that left no room for doubt. "Matthew owes these people nothing," she said, her voice firm and unwavering. "They abandoned him, abused him, and now they're trying to take advantage of his success. But the law's on Matthew's side, and I trust that this court will see the truth for what it is." The judge called for a brief recess before delivering her verdict. I sat in the courtroom, my heart pounding in my chest, while my parents whispered furiously to each other. I could see the fear in their eyes now, the realization that they were losing, that they had underestimated me. When Judge Evans returned, the room fell silent. She looked at my parents with a cold, steely gaze before delivering her judgment. "After reviewing all the evidence, it is clear that the plaintiffs have no legal claim to the defendant's assets," she said. "The evidence presented by the defense is overwhelming, and it paints a picture of a young man who has overcome unimaginable hardship to achieve success. The plaintiffs, on the other hand, have shown nothing but greed and a complete lack of remorse for their actions." She turned her attention to me. "Matthew, you have shown great strength and resilience in the face of adversity. This court commends you for your achievements, and I hope you can now move forward, free from the burdens of your past." With that, she dismissed the case, and it was over. I had won. But it wasn't just a legal victory, it was a personal one. I had stood up to my parents, confronted my demons, and come out stronger on the other side. As I left the courtroom, Victoria walked beside me, a satisfied smile on her face. "You did well, Matthew," she said. "I'm proud of you." I nodded, feeling a sense of closure I hadn't expected. "Thank you, Victoria. I couldn't have done it without you." Outside the courthouse, I saw my parents one last time. They were standing on the steps, looking defeated, lost in their own misery. For a moment I felt a pang of pity for them, but it was fleeting. They had made their choices, and now they were living with the consequences. I didn't say anything to them as I walked past. I didn't need to. I had said everything that needed to be said in that courtroom, and now it was time to move on. The victory was bittersweet, but it was a victory nonetheless. I returned to my life, to my friends, to the career I had worked so hard to build, and for the first time, I felt like I could finally put the past behind me. David was waiting for me at home, his eyes full of pride as I walked through the door. He didn't say much, just pulled me into a hug, and I knew that he understood. He had been there for me when no one else was, and now, with the trial behind me, I felt like I could finally start living the life he had always wanted for me. As the months passed, I threw myself back into work, determined to continue building the life I had fought so hard for. My career flourished, and with it my sense of purpose and fulfillment. I stayed close to Rachel, Alex, Michael, Jenny, and Lisa, our bond stronger than ever after everything we had been through together. There were still challenges, life is never without them, but I faced them with a new sense of confidence. I had confronted the darkest parts of my past and come out stronger on the other side. And I knew that whatever came next, I would be ready. Looking back now, I realized that trial was more than just a legal battle. It was a reckoning, a chance for me to finally close the chapter on a part of my life that had haunted me for so long. It was a chance to reclaim my story, to take ownership of my life, and to say, once and for all, that I was no longer a victim. And as I look to the future, I do so with hope, with strength, and with the knowledge that I am in control of my destiny. Because I am no longer defined by the people who tried to break me, I am defined by the life I have built, by the people who love me, and by the strength I have found within myself. And that, more than anything, is the greatest victory of all.